All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight, presented by FanDuel here at The Volume. Happy Friday, everybody. Congrats on making it to the weekend. Today is Memphis Grizzlies Day, because after absolutely pulverizing the Milwaukee Bucks at home last night, they have now won 7 games in a row. So we're going to take all the time today just to dive into what has made the Memphis Grizzlies so damn good this season. Now in sole possession of first place in the Western Conference. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Volume's YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss any show announcements. And last but not least, if you ever miss one of these shows and you can't get back over to YouTube to finish, you can find them wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. So, like I said, after dominating the Bucks, they've now won 7 games in a row. They're sitting at 19-9. They are in sole possession of first place in the Western Conference. They are 6th in offense on the season, 6th in defense on the season, 4th in net rating on the season. And in the month of December, which is where this winning streak is taking place, they are 2nd in offense, 1st in defense, and outscoring opponents by an astonishing 18 points per 100 possessions. And again, this is despite the fact that their big three of Jaren Jackson Jr., Ja Morant, and Desmond Bane has played a grand total of 0 minutes together this season. But according to Cleaning the Glass, when Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson have been on the floor this year, they are outscoring teams by 23.5 points per 100 possessions in 359 possessions. And when Ja Morant and Desmond Bane have shared the floor this year, they have outscored opponents by 20 points per 100 possessions in 465 possessions. So chances are, when those guys get back, they'll probably go up another level from there. Besides, they're struggling a little bit in spot-up shooting right now, and they're struggling a little bit in half-court offense right now. Desmond Bane is going to help a great deal in that specific case. But as you guys know, winning streaks happen in the NBA, typically against softer stretches of your schedule. So as always, you need a signature win, a win that defines and legitimizes your success. And that was it last night. Milwaukee came to town, and that was just one hell of a relentless ass-kicking. For 3 straight quarters, all the lead did was grow. At one point, the Grizzlies were up by 50 points in their early fourth quarter before they finally started to relax a little bit. I thought the story of the game was the job that Steven Adams and Jaren Jackson Jr. did on Giannis. When they were both on the floor together, they were kind of zoning him up and conceding those threes to Brook Lopez and kind of rotating to contest those threes with guards on the weak side. And so, you talk about the concept of building a wall on Giannis. They're building a wall with Jaren Jackson Jr. and Steven Adams. And those two guys, and we're going to talk a lot about this today because of the way this impacts the game in the offensive rebounding areas, in rebounding in general, defense and protecting the rim. Those two present a ton of problems for a ton of teams. But specifically for Giannis, that's as big of a wall that he'll have to go through all season. And they did a really nice job. And then even separately, when those two were staggered, I thought they did great work. I was really impressed with Steven Adams, giving ground, sliding his feet, attacking the basketball when Giannis would expose it, and forcing him to score over the top. They destroyed the Bucks in every physicality area of the game. They out-rebounded them 56-39. They outscored them in the fast break just by running it down their throat 27-14. And they outscored them. This is ridiculous. Mind you, this is literally one of the best paint teams on both ends of the floor in the entire league, the Milwaukee Bucks. Memphis outscored them 86-38 in the paint last night. And again, the Bucks are the 2nd best paint defense in the league, although the Grizz are the 3rd best paint defense in the league. Ja Morant is a superstar, and we're going to spend a lot of time talking about him today, and he is vitally important for the Grizzlies to eventually reach their ceiling. That is a fact. But make no mistake, this team's identity is their physicality. At their core, they are bullies, and they are bigger, they are faster, they are stronger than you, and they play harder than you. And they are going to destroy you in all of those areas. And that's what helps them to win games, particularly in the regular season. And that's why they've been so good when Ja Morant is off the floor over the course of the last few years. Now, again, like I said, for the ceiling, you have to be able to score in the half court. Ja Morant playing like a bona fide superstar is the only chance you're going to reach that level. But make no mistake, the identity of this team is that they are big, strong bullies that bully the rest of the league. This was a destructive and dominant performance against Milwaukee that makes Memphis look like the best team in the West. So what I'd like to do today is take some time. We're going to split it into two parts. We're going to focus in on the offensive end of the floor. And we're going to focus in on the defensive end of the floor. But I want to take a look at what exactly has been making Memphis so damn good. So on the offensive end, like I said before, they are 6th in offensive rating for the season. They are 2nd in December. And it all starts in transition. So according to Cleaning the Glass, they are scoring 1.3 points per transition play, which ranks 6th in the NBA. According to Synergy, they run in transition on 18.2% of their possessions, which ranks 8th in the NBA. So they run a ton. And most of this comes down to Ja Morant. First of all, he's a great rebounder for a guard. And when he secures that rebound, he's always looking to push the pace as much as possible. He works his way towards the middle of the floor, and he starts to get that pep in his step, that high dribble, kicking his legs a little bit. He wants to make you think that he's trying to get downhill, which, by the way, he usually does. In fact, almost a fifth of Ja Morant's shot attempts are in transition. So he is looking to score there a lot. But most importantly, he's looking to force the other team to build a wall, the way they do against a Giannis or against a Zion and things along those lines. And when you start to build a wall, people start to get open. And that's where Memphis is getting a lot of wide open three-point shots in transition. And this is important because they still aren't that good offensively in the half court. They're averaging just 0.95 points per half court possession, which ranks 19th in the league, according to Cleaning the Glass. This was an issue that plagued them last year. We talked about it a little bit during the regular season. I was worried about it in the postseason in terms of their half court shot creation, and it ended up being a problem for them often during that playoff run. But getting out in transition as much as possible is the best way for them to bolster their offense to avoid those half-court situations. Then when they get into the half-court, they don't really run much in the way of sets, especially when Ja Morant is on the floor. They do run a lot more offensive sets when Ja is off the floor to try to generate advantages for their lesser shot creators. But when Ja is on the floor, it's a steady diet of pick and roll, just about every time down the floor. He's already run more than 500 pick and rolls this year, which is 88th percentile in the league for volume. But again, we could talk about the final results. A lot of that has to do with the type of talent that they have on this team. Like Desmond Bane has made some steps as an offensive shot creator. We're going to talk about that a little bit more later. But Ja Morant's really the only high-level shot creator on the team in the half court. So because of that, you expect some limitations in half court offense. But when Ja has the ball in his hands and he's running those plays, it's been working really well. They're scoring 1.02 points per possession in over 500 pick and rolls this year, including passes, which is very good. The vast majority of pick and roll ball handlers in the league are averaging less than 1 point per possession. And that should tick way up when Desmond Bane comes back, because spot-up shooting has been an issue for them this year. In spot-up situations, they're a middle-of-the-pack team in terms of knocking down shots and attacking closeouts and things along those lines. Everything starts with him as a scorer being able to score in the paint. So Ja Morant scores 14.5 points in the paint per game, which ranks 7th in the entire NBA. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is the only guard in the league who scores in the paint more frequently than Ja Morant. Obviously, we've seen the acrobatic finishes with both hands on either side of the rim. He had a completely ridiculous right-handed scoop shot over Joel Embiid in that Sixers game the other day that I was watching. That was completely ridiculous. He's just got great touch around the rim, extending his arms out to avoid shot blockers. But a lot of it comes down to his floater. He's got a great floater. If you actually look at Ja Morant's shot breakdown, it's about 20% of his shots are floaters, and then another 30% of them are jump shots, pull-up jump shots, things along those lines, and then another 50, and then the rest, the other half, 50% of them are at the rim. That's a rough breakdown of where his shots are taken this year. But everything starts with him being able to get downhill. That's what changes the coverages. That's what forces drop coverage bigs to sit way back into the paint to contain him at the rim. That's what forces teams to offer help from the weak side. Everything fundamentally starts with Ja Morant scoring in the paint. From there, he's so good in the paint, like we said, second best guard in the league in the paint, that he just needs to be respectable as a jump shooter. And he's taking a lot of strides. He's shooting a career-high 35% from three. But most importantly, he's shooting 36% on 8 pull-up jumpers per game. Now, that's not great by any stretch of the imagination. The best pull-up jump shooters in the league are shooting around 45%. But that's good enough to be respectable. For instance, Russell Westbrook is a mid-20s pull-up jump shooter. One of the worst pull-up jump shooters in the league at volume. We had a stat the other day. There's 85 players that have shot at least 80 pull-up jumpers, and Russ ranked 84th in field goal percentage on those shots. That's so bad that teams can straight up concede that shot to him. Ja Morant being in that mid to high 30s, that's enough respect there to balance his downhill attack, which is so effective. But as a passer is where Ja Morant has been most impressive to me. The thing is so many athletic guards that we have in the history of the league, Russell Westbrook is another great example, Derrick Rose, John Wall, so many of those types of players struggle to play with pace. And what I mean by pace is controlling the pace up and down as the actual possession dictates. For instance, if you are a lightning bolt downhill, that can be damned effective in the right situations, in transition, when the spacing is right. But when you're barreling downhill and the paint is clogged, a lot of times you're just going to end up throwing up bad shots, complaining to the refs because you thought you got fouled, and giving up transition opportunities because you're laying on the ground while the other team is running the other way. What impresses me the most about Ja Morant as a passer is that he's extremely patient in pick and roll. This is one of the best athletes we have in the league that can go downhill and elevate over people anytime he wants, but he knows that he needs to pick his spots there in order to be truly efficient. You'll see him come off of the screen, and like, for instance, Steven Adams. Steven Adams is a great screener. And he's also a pretty decent, catch and finisher around the rim, but he's slower, right? His roll to the rim doesn't look the same as Anthony Davis rolling to the rim. But you will see Ja Morant patiently wait for the play to develop, understanding that Steven Adams is going to set a good screen. So he's going to get over the top and find an opening, get some separation from his guard. So if he can patiently wait long enough to get the screen defender to step up on him to take away that floater that he's taken 20% of his shots on, that gives time for Steven Adams to get downhill. That's when he can find him on those passes. That's where he ends up using the roll man. It's patiently coming off of the screen and waiting for the play to develop. And then, when we talk about pick and roll coverages, there's always a progression, right? In a drop coverage, especially if you can score in the mid-range, you'll eventually be able to get a screen defender to step up. Once you get the screen defender to step up, the roll man becomes open. But what is the next step in that progression? Teams are going to start to offer weak side help. We call it tagging the roller. Some people just refer to it as the low man responsibility. The lingo is not important. What it is help coming from the weak side to dissuade the pass to the roll man, which naturally leaves openings on the weak side wing and the weak side corner, depending on what that other defender does. If the defender that's on the weak side wing drops to the corner, then the wing is open. If he stays on the wing, then the weak side corner is open. So you have to be able to make the cross-court pass. And Ja Morant has been amazing with the cross-court pass this year with one hand, with two hands, elevating and passing while he's in the air, patiently waiting for that play to develop. He's been incredibly good making the right reads in pick and roll as they develop. And as a result, he's turned himself into a methodical and damned effective pick and roll creator. Other options in the half court, I'm going to save Desmond Bane for a little bit later in the show. Jaren Jackson Jr., we talked a lot about him last year being kind of a bulldozer, which can be problematic in a playoff setting sometimes if you're not seeing the floor well enough. He tends to catch the ball and just try to run people over on his way to the rim. But I was concerned about that last year in the regular season, and then it ended up working in the playoffs anyway. And the main reason why is because he's just so damn big and strong. And the volume is low enough that teams aren't really prepped for it on a possession-by-possession basis. It's been a small sample size so far this year, but Jaren Jackson Jr. is 14 for 25 from the field in post-ups and ISOs, which is incredible. He's just so much damn bigger and stronger and faster than most of the post players that we have in this league that he can have a lot of success there. Now, Dillon Brooks, he's a deeply impactful defensive player, and we're going to talk about that here when we get to the defensive end of the floor. But he is hilariously overused on offense. Somehow, for some reason, Dillon Brooks has already run 151 pick and rolls this year, resulting in just 119 points, which ranks in 18th percentile league-wide. So if it felt like to you as a Grizzlies fan that Dillon Brooks is trying to do too much, and by the way, that's including passes, if it felt like he was trying to do too much, statistically speaking, the Dillon Brooks pick and roll and Dillon Brooks isolations are not resulting in points at nearly a high enough level, but that's kind of part of the Dillon Brooks experience. He's a irrational confidence guy. That same irrational confidence is what drives him on the defensive end of the floor. So it's kind of like the Draymond Green thing, and a lot of players around the league. Marcus Smart was like this early on, although now he's become a really effective offensive player. You almost have to lean into their tendencies to allow them to feel confident in a basketball game. And in this case, it's giving Dillon Brooks touches that aren't necessarily resulting in points as often as you like. And then a huge chunk of the Grizzlies' offense is offensive rebounding. When you have Steven Adams and Jaren Jackson Jr., like we said, they're a massively imposing physical front line. They're right up there with Brook and Giannis and LeBron and AD in terms of physical ability to put their imprint on the game. Steven Adams is once again leading the league in offensive rebounds like he usually does. Jaren Jackson Jr. is helping there. And then Ja Morant is actually a sneaky good offensive rebounder this year. He's averaging about 1.5 per game. We talked about spot-up possessions earlier. They're very much in the middle of the pack when it comes to knocking down spot-up threes and attacking closeouts. So Desmond Bane coming back should be able to help them there to a great extent, and that should open things up for them a little bit more in the half court. All right, moving on to the defensive end of the floor. Like I said before, they're huge. Steven Adams and Jaren Jackson, as physically imposing as you'll find in the league. That affects offensive rebounding like we talked about, but it also helps them hold down the paint defensively. They are the third best paint defense in basketball, and they are the best rebounding team in basketball. They grab a higher percentage of available rebounds than any team in the entire league. Everything starts with Jaren Jackson and Steven Adams. They run drop coverage, they protect the rim extremely well, and they finish possessions with rebounds. I wanted to talk about Jaren Jackson Jr. here because he's averaging a career-high 3.3 blocks per game. And there's two things. I watched a ton of tape on Jaren Jackson this morning. And the two things in particular that I think help him become such a dominant rim protector is, one, his willingness to use his left hand. A lot of shot blockers only use their right hand, which limits you to half of the available footwork. And when you have to go across your body, you limit your reach and slow yourself down when you go to the ball. If you use both hands, it opens up every single available takeoff and footwork that you can use, and it allows you to take the shortest possible distance to the basketball at any given time. I obviously don't have a number to track this, but I think about half, if not more, of his blocks are with his left hand. And then the second big thing that helps him protect the rim so well is he baits players into attempting shots. You know, coaches will teach you, especially screen defenders, to play with your hands up. And one of the big reasons why they want to do that is a lot of bigs are lazy, and a lot of bigs do struggle to react to things. And so if they don't have their hands up, they'll be too slow to get their hand up to make a play. But ironically, when you show your hands, you tip the offensive player as to where you're defending. And one of the things that Jaren Jackson does really well is he kind of will hide his hands and squat down, sit in a defensive stance, and bait you into thinking, because your instincts as an offensive player, you don't see a lot of congestion up around the rim, so you're willing to go try something. He's waiting on you to do that, and then he explodes up out of that stance to make defensive plays at the rim. And then watch out, guys. Jaren Jackson Jr., his jumper's falling now, too. He is 48% from three on 4 attempts per game over his last 6 games. He's giving Brook Lopez a run for his money as the best rim-protecting stretch 5 that we have in the league right now. And then, you know, Steven Adams, I love Steven Adams as a person and as a player. And he does a lot of good things. I think ultimately, he can't play big minutes in a playoff setting just because of the way it impacts things offensively in terms of their spacing. Anytime you go 5-out spacing, it's more impactful than vertical spacing every day of the week. And Steven Adams is not a great vertical spacer anyway. So when you give the space with Jaren Jackson at the 5 as a shooter, you're going to be so much better offensively that it's worth it. But Steven Adams does a really good job eating innings during the regular season, and he's doing a really good job defensively this season in drop coverage. I was really impressed with the job he did on Giannis last night, like we talked about earlier. And then Dillon Brooks is one of the most important focal points of this defense. We talked about his offense earlier, but like I said, you have to kind of feed into that to feed his aggression on the defensive end of the floor. And aggression is the key word there, because he's kind of like the wing version of Chris Paul defensively. From the opening tips of games, he's fouling you on every single possession. He's hands-on, he's grabbing, he's bumping you, he's being overly physical. In fact, he's trying to be a pest. He's trying to irritate you. And he will pick up fouls from time to time, but it's one of those things where a lot of times, like with Chris Paul when he was in his prime, if you're committing fouls on every possession, the refs don't want to call a foul on every possession, so they let a lot of stuff go, which, by the way, makes it legal. And I get that that can be frustrating for fans of the other 29 teams when you're playing against Memphis, but the reality is, what is legal on a basketball court? We can read the rule book all we want. What's actually legal on the basketball court is what the ref does not blow the whistle for, which means if you are doing janky stuff that is going uncalled, then for all intents and purposes, it's legal. And Dillon Brooks finds ways to do that in the game and remain in the game. And that deeply bothers ball handlers, particularly opposing stars. You know, I talk a lot about the importance of making people feel uncomfortable. So, you know, as a scorer, you're going to have good nights and you're going to have bad nights. You're going to have nights where you shoot well, nights where you don't shoot well, nights where you take care of the ball, nights where you don't take care of the ball. It's not random. More often than not, it's a product of two different things. What the defense is doing and your rhythm. You know, obviously, if your touches get screwed with because, you know, just the way the flow of the game goes, that can disrupt things. But more often than not, it's the defense. And when Dillon Brooks, from the opening tip, is getting in your personal space and making you feel uncomfortable, it leads to you having sloppy nights. Chris Middleton was 1 for 12 last night with 3 points and 4 turnovers. And within the first few minutes of the game, was having a freak out where he was grabbing Dillon Brooks on the leg. You don't think that that has an impact on winning? He is their weapon to throw at opposing stars. You've seen him guard little guards. You've seen him guard wings. He can guard just about any archetype in the NBA at the superstar position except for the centers. Deeply impactful player, arguably the most important defensive player on the Memphis Grizzlies, depending on how much you value their rim protection. Now, Ja Morant, he's still a nightmare in on-ball situations. He dies on screens. He concedes shots instead of making extra efforts a lot of the time. But they do tuck him away on spot-up players. Like they're going to find a way to put him in a situation where he's off-ball in the corner, like he was guarding Javon Carter for most of the game last night. But what I do appreciate with Ja Morant is he does make defensive rotations. So like if he's on, if he's on Javon Carter in the corner and Jaren Jackson Jr. and Steven Adams are containing Giannis and Brook Lopez is on the wing, he will make those efforts to run over and contest shots. Now, he leaves his feet too often, and he had a play against, I think it was Bobby Portis, where he chased him to the corner and jumped out of his feet. And then Bobby Portis just took a one-dribble pull-up at 15 feet. So he's still pretty undisciplined, still sloppy, but he finds little ways to impact. And then he grabs a lot of defensive rebounds, which, like I said, is so important to finishing defensive possessions and starting the break for them going the other way. Since November 22nd, so almost a month, this is over the last 11 games for the Grizzlies, they are the number one defense in all of basketball. Now, as we look at them in the playoffs, their size and physicality is going to be a pain in the ass for every single team in the league to deal with. Ja Morant will be targeted on defense. We saw that with Minnesota when Patrick Beverley was attacking all the time. They're going to find ways to attack him, but in the net, it's a huge positive. I'm not necessarily worried about that. My main concern with the Grizzlies in the playoffs will always be their half-court offense. Like I said earlier, according to Cleaning the Glass, they are the 19th ranked half-court offense in the league. They mostly just run Ja pick and rolls. The key to putting them over the top as real contenders, like at the same level as Milwaukee, Golden State, or Boston, will be Jaren Jackson Jr. and Desmond Bane and their ability to create shots for themselves. Like we said earlier, Jaren Jackson Jr., small sample, but he's 14 for 25 in post-ups and ISOs this year. Desmond Bane had shown some flashes of individual creation that was not there last year before his injury. He was shooting 46% on 7 pull-up jumpers per game, including 47% on pull-up threes. And he's been pretty good in pick and roll, albeit in a very small sample size, averaging 1.09 points per possession, including passes, which is in the 84th percentile. But he is just 4 for 11 from the field in isolation situations. Desmond Bane absolutely must become a legit second option in the half court as a shot creator for this team to have any chance of reaching their ultimate playoff ceiling. Now, Desmond Bane does not have a great first step. He's not a fantastic athlete. The biggest advantage he has is he's big and strong. And when you weaponize that with his shooting, if he can use that to get small angles, like I always said, there's like a kind of like an equation at play in dribble drive situations. If you are incredibly fast, but you are very thin, then you need perfect driving lanes, because you're not going to be able to beat people through physicality, right? So if I cut you off 15% and I hold strong with this shoulder, you're going to run into that shoulder and lose all your momentum because you're thin. But if you are a big, strong athlete that is bigger and stronger than your defender, then when you get that slight angle, you can blow through that shoulder, or when the defender is on your hip, you can shield him off to get to the rim. Desmond Bane does a really nice job when he's coming off of pick and rolls and the defender is on his hip and the roll man is occupying the screen defender, of shielding that defender off with his shoulder to get all the way to the rim. I even saw him do it against big centers a couple times this year, where the center comes up to the level of the screen to take away that pull-up jumper, and he comes around that shoulder and goes to the rim, and he's shielding off big, strong centers to extend out and finish at the rim. If he can just get to that point where he can consistently hit the pull-up jumper, finish at the rim when the screen defender comes too high, and make some basic passing reads out of pick and roll, that might be enough to push them over the top. Now, again, and the reason why that's so important, again, guys, and the reason why half-court scoring is so different than in the playoffs than it is just in general versus transition open floor scoring, but especially in the playoffs, is scouting. For instance, Desmond Bane is an outstanding movement shooter. You run him off screens all day long, and he can get shots. The problem is that in playoff settings, they are scouted to the point where those easy opportunities don't exist anymore. You need guys that can generate advantages in static situations and stagnant situations as well, rather than just, I run off a screen, guy dies on the screen, I get a wide open three. It's just a little bit more complicated there. That's why I'm talking about the higher level offensive creation. They're going to need to demonstrate that to get to the level of Boston or Golden State or Milwaukee, but this very well might be the year that they do. All right, guys, that is all I have for today. As always, I sincerely appreciate your support. We will be back tomorrow morning breaking down all the games from this packed Friday night slate. See you guys then.